We are less than 2 weeks away from November, which means we are less than 2 weeks away from NaNoWriMo, which means it's time for another Preptober video. This is the 4th video in my Preptober series, so if you haven't watched my other videos first, I highly suggest you go back and do that. Like I said in my last one, we are going to be focusing more on you as a person instead of your writing craft or how to write a story in this episode, if you want to call it that. I don't know. Because as you probably know, writing is a very solitary thing, whether you do it as a career or a hobby. You know, when you're writing a story, more often than not, you're doing it alone. You're alone in your office or you're alone at the computer. You can't be doing the writing thing with someone else. And for a lot of people, that is really hard, especially if you are extroverted or you're used to creative team building hobbies or careers or things like that. Writing can be very, very lonely. I think Stephen King actually talks about this in his book on writing a little bit, but basically just, you know, when you're writing, you're doing it alone. And first of all, your writing space should be your sanctuary. It should be a space for your writing and only that, if you are able to do that. The way our brains work, it picks up on patterns of things. And so if you write during the same time every day or for the same amount of time or in the same place, your mind will know, okay, this is my writing spot. This is where I write. I am ready to write because we're here. I'm doing a really bad job explaining it. But anyway, it's really, really hard to maintain things socially if you're writing all the time. And for a lot of us, that can really negatively impact our mental health. So this video is actually going to be all about maintaining mental health as writers. And I just want to say, if you are someone who suffers from depression, first of all, you're not alone. I promise you. But second of all, a lot of these things are probably going to be things you've heard before, but I want to encourage you to look at this through the lens as a writer and not necessarily in ways that you've been told this advice before, because I think it will give you a different understanding of how you can frame this and have it serve you as a writer or someone who wants to do this as a hobby or a career. So while some of these tips might seem obvious or arbitrary, I really want to encourage you to take a look at it again through this lens of a writer or as a person, because if this isn't something that you're already doing as a career or something that you're spending a lot of time doing, and you're about to do it a lot in November, it's probably gonna be a bit of a change and it probably will impact you mentally in some way. Also, it's always great to have a reminder to take care of yourself because guarding your mental health is one of the most important things that you can do. These are just some tips that I've come up with / found online. I'm gonna have sources in the description as always. Take this as you will, take what you need, leave what you don't, and I hope that you can find something that helps you in this. My number one tip is that nature is your best friend. I know, everyone says it, like when you're depressed, like you just have to go outside. And I hate that it is true. It is one of the worst things because sometimes going outside is the last thing that you want to do when you're not feeling super great mentally, especially with it being November. I know I grew up in Wisconsin, and so November is chilly. Like we had feet of snow in November growing up. And so I can't even imagine, you know, in some areas it's not going to be great to go outside, but I would suggest at least getting out of the room that you're writing in and like open the window for a couple minutes or go for a 5-minute walk. It is honestly the easiest and best thing that you can do for your mental health and to get yourself out of your head. I find that when I'm writing for a particularly long amount of time, I get really heady. Like I get so foggy in my head and I am not in my body anymore. And getting outside and just feeling the earth under my feet, smelling the air, listening to the breeze in the trees or whatever really helps me find myself again and allows me to reset and recharge. So this is a great way to find my body again, as well as just taking a mental break away from the computer. And you can do this with friends, you can do this with family if you don't want to do it alone. If you have a dog, you can take your dog for a walk, or it can just be a walk for yourself to be with yourself and to think of creative ideas outside of maybe what you've been focusing on. My second thing is to just take breaks when you need it. And I know, like for me, I give myself permission to take breaks. I will never work again. Like I will just never work. We'll just be on break forever. But what I mean by this, if you're someone like me who just like cannot let themselves have that kind of freedom, is to have water available next to you at all times, and snacks. And like when you need to take a 2-minute break to eat a snack, do it. A lot of people have had success with setting 15-minute timers, and every 15 minutes they take like a 2-minute break. And if they're feeling the need to not take a break after 15 minutes, they just reset it and go for another 15. But it's still a great way to keep track, and you're still taking consistent breaks for yourself. But also, like, you just need to take breaks. Like you do, I promise, even if you think you don't. As much as we love our morning coffee, that is not a meal. We need to eat, we need to have snacks available. Fruit is really good because of the sugar content. It can help you like stay energized. Sorry, I had to take Suki outside, so if I look a little disheveled, that would be why. Also, if you are like me and you're kind of neurodivergent and you have issues with making yourself food and remembering to eat, I would say meal prepping is your friend, and have something available that you can just toss into the microwave really quick to have ready for you, because eating is really important. We need to feed our minds, we need to feed our bodies so that we can be the best that we can be. And along with that comes drinking enough water and yeah, all that good stuff. Fueling your body, super important. The third thing I would say is to find your people, both writers and non-writers, because writers are going to be the people who really understand what you're going through in terms of, like I was saying, with like the solitary elements of writing or the difficulties of writing in general, versus you also need people who don't write so that you can get out of that space. I know when I was in college and I'm a musical theater major, I was surrounded by theater people all the time. And let me tell you, my nursing major friends were my saving grace a lot of the time, because it was the only time that I was really not in that group of people. And it's really important to break out of that sometimes. It's great to have those people, but it's also really great to have other friends that you can rely on and get away from what I would consider, work. I think it's just important to have those people available to you so that you can have a community of people to support you, even if they aren't writers themselves. Because you wouldn't take work home with you if you were working at a restaurant or retail or anything like that. Like, why would you take work home with you if you're a writer? Which is harder to do because we normally write in our own homes, and it's harder to separate that, but I think it's really important to have both of those things separate sometimes. The fourth thing I want to talk about is routine, and this is what I think my last Preptober is going to be about, but having a routine is super important, especially when it comes to separating your writing life and your personal life, because those things tend to bleed over a lot. And I think having them separate is really important for your mental health. So one thing I would say is to have certain times of the day when you write, have a writing routine or schedule. So if you work full-time outside of writing, and you're going to be writing, let's say, an hour a day, try and have that be the same hour every day, and don't write outside of that hour, because you need personal time just as much as everyone else. And having that hour, even if you only write 10 words in that hour, that was your hour of work. And I know, the goal of NaNoWriMo is to get to 50,000 words by the end of the month, but I don't think that you should be trying to spend 10 hours a day getting there, because that's just not healthy for anyone. And it's important to not let writing leach its way into the rest of your life, because it is important, if it's a hobby, making it everything is just not going to be really great for you as a person. So schedule your time and work within that time, and then when it's not that time, just let it go away. If the muse speaks to you and you are moved to write something down, great. I always carry multiple notebooks with me everywhere around the house so that I can write stuff down as soon as an idea comes to mind, or I throw it in my phone to transfer later. But sitting down to write at the same time every day is going to be the best way to not only be consistent, but to protect your mental health as a person. Number 5 is going to be listen to your body. Your body knows you better than you think you do. And if you are not feeling well, you need to listen to your body and what your body is saying. And that's physically, mentally, and emotionally. And the thing is, we need to give ourselves some grace when it comes to being kind to ourselves and listening to ourselves, because if your body needs rest, you just need to rest. There's really no getting around that. And your mind is where your ideas come from. Your fingers are where the words are being typed out or written down with. You need to take care of that. And if you can't do it on a certain day, that's okay. You need to give yourself the grace that you need to be okay with that and to allow yourself to rest and to be nice to yourself. You know, your story will be there tomorrow. NaNoWriMo, especially, is not the end all be all, but your story is going to be there and the words will come. But in order to write tomorrow, you need to take care of yourself today. If you are really dealing with intense brain fog, or you know, you've got a headache, a migraine. I get migraines sometimes and they are debilitating. And even if I wanted to write, I would not be able to. It wouldn't even be worth trying to suffer through it because like it wouldn't happen anyways. So why beat yourself up over it? Just take some time away, listen to your body, take a nap, whatever you need, and just do it. Number 6 is going to be don't judge your work while you're writing it. This is super important. I have this issue a lot when I'm writing. I know a lot of other people struggle with this as well. This kind of goes into like self-editing while you're writing. And I talk about this a little bit in my last video where like just let your first draft be a draft. Let it be messy, silly, whatever. Let it be dumb. There is so much time to go back and edit and make your story pristine and beautiful. But if you spend all of your time editing and re-editing the paragraph that you just wrote, you're never gonna get further than a couple thousand words. You're just not. So I think the best thing is to just keep chugging along and to not judge yourself while you're writing, because the good stuff comes later. And honestly, the only thing that this ends up doing is makes you question yourself as a writer and as an author, and like you start thinking like, oh my God, this is so bad. Like, am I good at writing? Am I good at what I do? And the answer is yes. It's okay. Writing is fine. You can always go back, but don't focus on what it looks like right now, because your first draft is not going to be the thing that you publish to the world. You know, like you can clean it up later, you can make it make sense later, just get it all on the page, let it be messy, let it be creative and everything, and then just come back to it way later. Number 7 is be careful what you write about. And I say this because oftentimes artists will pull from their own life or their own traumas to write about, and if you aren't healed enough from that trauma, it can make it worse if you try to vicariously relive that through your work. I would just say to be mindful of where you are on your journey in healing and taking care of yourself, and see if that's the best choice for now. And remind yourself that, you know, it's not your fault, and, you know, we just need to be responsible for ourselves and not let yourself fall into that dark place. And it's our responsibility to know where that line is for us as artists and people. There are certain things that I will not include in my books because of that, and that's okay. And I know there are other authors who have no problem being explicit and talking about and pulling from traumas of their lives, and that's amazing. But I just want to make it be known that like you don't need to do that to have your work be profound, interesting, and real. You can pull from other parts of your life and be just as creative and interesting and wonderful, and not feel like you have to dig into the deepest, darkest depth of yourself. So just be mindful of where that is for you. Number 8 is don't be afraid to ask for help. And sometimes that's as little as just Googling something, but also just reaching out to people. Life is hard, writing is hard. Lots of writers have struggled with mental illness in the past. I think that is something that just a lot of artists deal with as a whole. Find your support group and speak to them, be open with them. Surround yourself with people who remind you of the best parts of yourself and who are able to be there for you when you need them. And also people who can remind you that you are more than the art that you put out, and that you are more than what you write. You are a whole person. You are not just a writer. You are not just an author. You know, you are not just a student, you know, wherever you may be in your life. You know, that is not all of who you are. You are who you are. And so I think it's really important to not be afraid to ask people for help and to find those people who will help you find yourself again when you need it. Number 9 is remind yourself why you love writing. I'm pretty sure we all write because we love to do it. I mean, I would think that would be why. Maybe it is a process to help you with self-healing. Maybe it is a creative outlet for you. You know, it could be a million different things. Just remind yourself why you're doing this in the first place. And sometimes that means taking time away from your writing to do something completely different, to come back to it with a fresh palette and to re-experience the joy of writing. Because if you're not feeling the joy and the healing of what the writing is supposed to do for you, it's probably time for a break. I always am a fan of just writing something different, writing something fun, you know, writing something absolutely kooky and wild. You could write a short story about just the silliest things and come back to it later and just like find something that just feels good to you as an author. I'm also a big fan of rereading books by authors who inspire you, authors that you want to create the essence of in your own stories. Oftentimes I find that that really rekindles the spark inside of me that made me so excited to write in the first place. An example for me is I really love the poetic language of V.E. Schwab. Her stories and books aren't necessarily my most favorite, but I love listening to her words and seeing how and what she's doing so that I can kind of recreate that in my own style. And I think that's important as well as writers, is to be readers and to find the things that just really spark the joy within you. The last thing I want to talk about is journaling, if you can. I have a journal. I'm really bad at keeping up with it because just my mind is everywhere, but it has kind of turned into like my to-do list / place where I just like brain vomit onto the page when I like don't know where else I can write it. If you're not someone who likes to talk about their day-to-day stuff, like maybe you could keep a dream journal, because I always think that that's really interesting and fun and like a really great source of inspiration. And oftentimes our dreams can like reveal our subconscious and like maybe what we're feeling. You can also write things that you're thankful and grateful for. You could just write about how you're feeling that day. It doesn't even have to make sense. I mean, no one else is gonna read it. You know, it could just be a bunch of adjectives for how you're feeling that day. It could be a graph, it could be a drawing, you know, whatever. I like to think of like the mind as unexplored territory, and it's like up to us to create the map of our mind and to make it make sense. Create the workings of your inner world and what that looks like. And sometimes I just free write. I write, you know, whatever is coming to mind. It doesn't need to be about my day or anything, just, you know, whatever I'm feeling in that moment or memories that are popping up or anything like that. I find that once I put it on the page, it's a lot easier to process through, and I can reflect on that instead of just keeping it all up in my head. And just if you're struggling with mental health issues, please, please, please know that you're not alone and that there are people who want to help you, that people who care about you and want you to stay here. You are more important than anything. As always, I've put some links in the description down below for you to check out if you want to do some further reading. I hope that you found some of these tips helpful. If you did and you want to continue to see content like this, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. It really, really, really does help me out a lot. I want to thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.